All right, so welcome to chapter 4, and this is really talking about creative problem solving and decision making, and how you go about doing it as a manager, leader of teams and people. So, running a business is a series of decisions, right? It's not, do I open a business? That is the very first decision of among countless others. Everything that you do, the kind of customers you pursue, the type of products or services that you sell, how you're going to adapt to new changes, new developments, new technology, all of these things are going to be decision making, decision after decision after decision, which makes it one of the most crucial skills for management, right? Because those decisions or the results of those decisions result in either success or failure of the company. All right, so you have this interrelationship among objectives, problem solving, decision making. So your company has an objective. You need to accomplish something. Usually it's something quantifiable, like you need to increase sales. Okay. So the problem is you're not achieving the goal, right? So what are you going to do? The problem solving is then taking the corrective actions to meet those objectives. So really what it is you look at the situation. I need to increase sales to say 10% above last quarter. How are you going to do that? You take a look at the current situation, right? Why aren't you achieving that? And then work out how you can achieve that. Okay. And then the decision making is after you've brainstormed, which is what problem solving is. Um, so you problem solve, you brainstorm, find out all the different alternatives that you could do to achieve your goal, and then the decision making is selecting the one that you think is going to make the biggest impact, or the one that you want to pursue because time and resources are limited. You choose that, and then that's the path you go down. But it's not in isolation. When you're doing this, the reason why it's interrelated is because your objectives and your solutions and then your ultimate decision are all going to be dependent on each other. All right, so there's three things that you need to determine if a problem actually exists. First one, is there a gap between your reality and your desired objective? If there isn't, you don't have a problem. Do you have the resources to deal with it? And time factor. Okay, so if these things don't exist, then you don't have a problem, right? Like you could have a difference between your reality and your desired goal. You might have the time to actually fix it, but if you don't have the resources to deal with it, then you don't have a decision to make because you can't fix it. Same thing is if there's a gap between your actual and desired, you do have the resources to fix it, but you don't have the time to fix it. It's not a decision you can even make, right? This is maybe a pivot down the road, but it's not something that you can do. So all three of these need to be present for you to be able to make a decision about how you can fix the gap. All right, and then you make your decisions and you solve problems through the four management functions, right? So planning, that's where you make decisions about the objectives and when, where, and how they're going to be met. Organizing is deciding on what to delegate and how to coordinate your resources to achieve that goal. And then you have staffing, which is deciding whom to hire and train or retrain, and leading, deciding how to influence your employees so that you can obtain those objectives. And last is control. So that's how you're going to monitor your progress and select methods to ensure that your objectives are being met. And if they're not being met, then how can you correct it as quickly as possible? Right. So the decision-making styles, the first one is reflexive, right? And so this is, if you think about it, a lot of these are very similar, but think about what the word choice actually thinks about or pulls to mind. So a reflexive action is one that you do unconsciously, right? You make quick decisions without taking the time to consider all of the information that's needed, and without spending too long in the alternatives. The positive is that you're decisive, You don't procrastinate, you make decisions. You rapid fire a lot of the time decisions. Negative side is because you make such quick decisions, it could lead to waste and duplication. Um, and so the trick with this is you need to make decisions, but not too quick, right? So what kind of style are you? The first is reflexive. The second would be reflective. I think of this as a lake. When you're looking at the lake, you see yourself, right? Calm surface, right? And it's deep waters. Um, and what this draws to mind is, people that are reflective, they take time to make their decisions. They gather a lot of information. They analyze a lot of different alternatives. The positive is they don't make hasty decisions. So, like in a reflexive situation, sometimes you just jump into it. Well, in a reflective, um, you avoid that trap, right? Because you've actually weighed all of the pros and the cons, and then made the decision that was the best. Okay, so that's the positive. The negative is this actually leads to indecisiveness because do you have enough information? A lot of people when they are a reflexive style, they need more information. At a certain point, no new information is going to change the problem or the solutions to it. But if you're waiting for those, you can lose opportunities. It could cost you just because you're putting in making a decision off. It can cost you time. It can cost you resources, and for that, that's a downside. So one of the things you're going to see on these styles is that too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Okay. All right, so if you think of those two styles, reflexive versus reactive, as two sides of a continuum, the middle is going to be consistent. Okay, when you're a consistent style, it means that you don't rush into making a decision, right? You wait to get just enough information so you can make a sound decision, um, but you're not waiting too long. Um, it comes with pros and cons, right? You don't have the speed of somebody that is reactive, but you also don't make the unnecessary mistakes of somebody that is that jumps into the pool too quickly, or you don't miss opportunities because you've waited too long. So the idea is you're trying to kind of blend both of these styles. So react what's going on quickly, but also make sure that you pause to take in enough information so that you make sound decisions. All right, so how do you make decisions? Um, the best thing you can do is follow a model, and the reason for it is that it'll improve the decisions that you make. Sometimes it's very easy just to jump to this is the solution to the problem without considering all of the alternatives or all the downsides of the decision that you make. That's where the decision making theory comes in, which we're going to talk about next. So it's a six-step process, and it might sound overly complicated, but essentially what it is the first thing is you got to define what the problem is. What is the actual problem? Okay, and then classify how big of a problem it is. And the reason why this is a huge step is because if it's not a huge problem, that should determine whether or not you should even do anything about it, right? Is it an annoyance or is it a legitimate problem? So you got to define that. Then you have to set your objectives and your criteria. What are you trying to accomplish, right? You have to have some sort of a goal. You have to have an endpoint in mind so that you know that if your thing actually accomplished the goal. Okay, so you have to have those at the very beginning, um, and then you got to generate creative and innovative alternatives. So here's your goal. It's obviously a big enough problem that you move on to the next step. So what are some different ways that you can solve it? This is where honestly, this is where the use of AI could come in really handy, right? If you define the problem, um, if you can feed in enough prompts, so you can define the problem, you can have some sort of objectives, and you hit go, and it say and have AI help you create alternatives. A lot of them aren't going to be worth anything, but some of them are, right? So you just at this stage, it's not about whether or not they're going to work. You're just trying to get as many different ideas as possible. Okay, so you want to get creative about how you can do that, and then you take a real look at them afterwards, after you generated a bunch of ideas, and say, okay, which ones are feasible? Out of all of these, some of them aren't going to be, can immediately cross them off the list, and then plan and then implement the decision. So you've identified which is the most feasible, you choose it, right? And then you implement it, and then you control the decision, which means you have some sort of metrics in place as the choice is going through its stages, and then you analyze it at the end to make sure that it actually accomplished the goals that you've set in step number 2. All right. So when you're classifying the problem, you're going to have to determine if it's a program decision or a non-program decision. Programmed is a decision that arises routinely. Okay. Um, so you've seen this happen before. You've got examples of organizational policy referring to a no refund, right? So when a customer comes and wants to actually get a refund for their product because of XYZ whatever, you have the policy that you can just refer to. You don't have to go through a whole 6-step program to know whether or not you should actually apply that refund. That's what's a program decision. Okay, it's something that happens all the time, or current enough that you don't need to really adjust too much. Okay, non-programmed are decisions that are non-routine and non-reoccurring. Okay, so this could be something like selecting a new product to sell, entering into a new market, opening a new facility, things of that nature. And then you have a couple of things that play into it: certainty and risk. Okay, so certainty is, do you know the outcome of each alternative in advance? Okay, so that's what certainty is. So if you go into this new market, how certain are you that it's going to lead to an increase in sales? Okay. On the other side of that is risk. Do you know the exact outcome? And risk is you don't know the exact outcome and in advance, right? And it's the probability of success or failure. Okay. And then uncertainty is the lack of information or knowledge to help make those decisions. So you're balancing those 3 things. You're balancing certainty, how certain that this is going to work. Risk, what is the downside trade-off if this does not work, right? And then your uncertainty, right? The lack of information to make that decision work. So when to use the decision-making model, when you're using program decisions under conditions of low risk and certainty, you don't need to follow the model, right? When making non-program decisions that have risk or uncertain elements, follow the model to make your sound decision. So it really comes down to, if you can make the decision because it's a certain decision or it's a routine decision and it's low risk, program. If it's not those things, there's higher risk, higher uncertainty, there's a lot more unknowns, then it's going to be a non-program decision and you need to follow the model. All right, so now you have decision to make. So you have program decisions and non-program decisions. The difference between them is how often do you use it? Okay, if it's a low risk type situation, there's a lot of certainty, you know what's going to happen, then you don't need to follow the model. This would be something like a policy of return policy. It's very, very simple. Not a lot of ambiguity here. You know, the product's defective, so you just return it, right? That's a program decision. A non-program decision, that's one that's high risk. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's unusual. Okay, so it's not a routine type thing that comes up. That's a non-program decision, and that's when you need to follow the model. All right, so typically, how are you going to, how many people do you need to include in this decision-making process? Well, it depends. If it's a situation where it's a high risk, there's a lot of uncertainty, then really what you want to do is you want a group making decision, because you want a lot of input from a lot of different sources. You want to hear the best ideas, and then you want to make a decision after you've gotten all of the facts. However, If it's low risk and it's a certain issue, then an individual doesn't need to include the entire group. Does it make sense? So it's like, if it's something that's complex, it's risky, then definitely do use a group. But if it's something that you can handle by yourself, then handle it by yourself. All right, after you know that there is a problem, what you got to do is you have to understand how big of a problem it is and what is the cause of it. So how you do that is by you asking the right questions. Those would be ones that elicit the answers that are describing the symptoms, right? What are you actually experiencing? And then after you'd identify the symptoms of the problem, then ask for the cause of it. So an example of this would be McDonald's sales and profits are low. This is the problem: low sales and profits. The cause would be societal change to healthier food and increased competition from Chick-fil-A and Chipotle. So that's how you would identify it, and that's how you'd work through it. All right. So you have rational maximizers and rational satisfiers. So here's the difference. A maximizer is somebody that tends to make rational decisions, taking their time and weighing a wide range of options before choosing, whereas a satisfier tends to make bounded rational decisions and would rather be fast and thorough, right? Typically, this is because either of time pressure, cost and availability of information, or some sort of cognitive bias. And then beware of cognitive bias. What this is your brain, while it can process a lot of information, typically what it does is it does that by eliminating some things, right? So what that means is simply this: your brain is looking to categorize stuff into certain buckets of information, if you will. It's one of the reasons why we stereotype other people in people groups, and you have to be aware of this bias, okay? Because things like your emotions get in your way, your attitude and your perception towards your biases, and then your motivations are all come into play, right? So not only with your motivations for what you want to achieve in this situation, but also your unethical motives, right? The desire to see certain people succeed or fail, for instance. That is all wrapped into how you make your decisions. Okay, and you need to be aware of that so that you can actively work against those biases. All right, setting objectives is really important because if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. Okay, you have to have a clear goal, clear focus on where you're going to go, and it needs to be specific. If you set out a goal that you want to increase sales, but you don't say how much, does it do anything for you? It's literally just a waste of time because you didn't set anything that was measurable. It was specific so that you can actually attain it. And one of the most important things about setting goals, not only does it have to be realistic, it has to be attainable. It's got to be a stretch goal so that you actually have to work for it. But if you don't do any of those things because you don't make it specific or measurable in any way, then you lost the whole point of actually even having goals to begin with. All right, next is talking about criteria. These are the standards or alternatives that you are setting so that you can achieve your desired goal, right? Your objective. There's two types of criteria. You have a must criteria and then a want criteria. A must criteria is something that you have to have. For instance, I think in the reading quiz, it's a 1,200 square foot shop. That's a must because they can't operate in anything less than a 1,200 square foot. 1,200 square foot. A want criteria is something that you want above and beyond that. So it would be really nice if it had this. It's not a deal breaker, but I would prefer it. So those are wants. If you're acting as a satisfier, what you would do is you'd stop with the first acceptable alternative. If you're acting as a maximizer, then you would seek to select the best possible option. All right. So then you need to weigh your criteria. Your must criteria are essential. So these are deal breakers. You either it has to have it or it doesn't go at all, right? And then want criteria can be weighed by importance. So you want everything, obviously, but um, what could make it the most beneficial? That's where the this Kigner-Trow method comes in. Basically, it's a mathematical calculation that you establish what your wants are, and it helps you rank them so that you can identify if you had to choose between them, your different wants. For instance, like a car, like you're wanting low mileage, get good gas mileage, and you want it blue if you can, right? Those aren't deal breakers, but that's what you want. Using this method, what you can identify is which are the most important for you, and that will help you select the best outcome because it helps you weigh, do I really like the blue that much, or is it really more important for me to do the low mileage? Okay, so creativity and innovation, a lot of people think that they're the same thing, but they're not. Creativity really is a new way of thinking about something. What it does is it helps you generate new ideas. It could lead to new products, potentially new markets. Innovation, on the other hand, it's the implementation of a new idea. Innovations are things like pretty much everything that Apple has done, right? They've taken something. A lot of the products that you're familiar with Apple were already made by somebody else. However, they weren't super successful, and Apple identified why, and then was able to fix those product defects so that it was appealing to consumers and turn around and sell it for amazing profit. These are things like the Apple iPhone, iPod, um, uh, the earbuds, pretty much everything was not new, but it was just repackaged and redesigned in a way that was appealing to people. That's really what innovative is. Um, all right, these are different barriers to creativity. Basically, anything that you're saying that is it's impossible. Okay, what does that do for you? It honestly kills ideas. Instead of saying, instead of giving some logical feedback about why it wouldn't work in the context, you just saying blanket statements like that. What it does is it kills creativity and innovation. Um, so in all of these other things, we've never done it that way before. Well, it doesn't matter. Maybe it was implemented incorrectly, and maybe this is something that can work if done the correct way. Um, so All right, so here's your creative process. First, you have preparation, which is where you define the problem. You're getting other people's opinions, feelings, ideas, as well as many facts as you can. And then you have the incubation stage. Um, sorry, what incubation is, okay, after you have um, gathered all of this different information, what you're doing is you're letting your subconscious work on your problem. So have you guys ever thought about something that you have a trouble that you have a problem that you need to overcome, and you're just kind of stuck? The best thing to do is to sleep on it, right? Or to go do something else, go for a walk or whatever. That is letting your brain in the background. It's still working the problem. It's incubating. It's coming up with a solution, right? Um, so letting your subconscious work, and sometimes what you end up getting is elimination, right? Some great idea on how you can actually move forward, and then you evaluate, right? Evaluate your different alternatives and make sure that your ideas are practical. And then some companies, what they do is they actually have a devil's advocates group. Really, what this is a group that literally just takes ideas and they just try to poke as many holes in the ideas possible and see if it actually could stand up to the test of what it's going to be up against. All right, so you can also use artificial intelligence, right, or big data, however you want to phrase it in this case. The more information you have, the more it can help to solve problems. Um, and it gives credibility to presenting decisions. All of this different stuff is good. Problem is, you can actually have too much information. I talked about it in class, but it's true. There's a point where you reach saturation, where no new information is really going to come in. So by just adding above and beyond that really isn't going to add a lot more, right? So the whole thing about data and information is that an AI is that you don't want it to be doing the work for you. You want to use the AI or the data to make informed decisions. You don't want to be driven by the data because that can actually lead you wrong because it's replacing intuition and all of your experience with one data set. And if you interpret that wrong, it could lead you right off a cliff. All right. Another thing that's great about data is that or technologies that can provide a lot of information really quickly. Um, you know, good example is just use AI to write a paper, right? You just tell it the parameters and it kicks it out within a few seconds. Um, also, this next point is really important. You got to be careful about false information available on the internet. Same thing with AI. Basically, it just scrapes what it can, and if it can't find what it needs, it just makes it up. So one of the reasons why you shouldn't have it write your paper is because roughly speaking, about 95% of the sources that they quote are going to be wrong, completely made up. So it provides a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of stuff that you can actually use. But so it's a net positive in that aspect, but you have to check it. All right, so here's a couple of different ways to generate creative alternatives. One, brainstorming. I think you guys are all familiar with this. Literally just throw out as many ideas as possible. Kind of one of the rules you want to have on any of this stuff, though, is you don't want to say no too often. You want to just get people to be creative because as soon as you say no to an idea, it actually arrests the flow. So um, basically, that's what you do. Just get as many different ideas on paper as you possibly can. Synetics is where you assign people roles. You don't give them a problem statement. You assign people roles and actually just let them role play. And what you'll see is that stuff will naturally come up. The problems actually kind of find themselves, especially if you have one person playing the customer and one person playing management or whatever sales, and so you can really talk about and you have an understanding of the customer's perspective. You can bring that information out through the role play, and it's really helpful as far as it goes. Nominal grouping. Um, what you do is you first you list as many different ideas as possible, right? You list a lot of ideas. Um, you record. So one person is going to present the idea one at a time, right? So everybody can actually see them. Um, then the next step is clarification. So alternatives are clarified through guided discussion, and then you rank them, right? So which one do you think is the best? And then you have some more discussion about them, and then you vote. So we do this actually at home when we're trying to decide what board game we're going to play. How this works is very simple. I send them out, all my kids, to go get a board game, any one of their choosing. They bring it back, they put it in a stack, right? And then they say, this is the reason why I want to play this game for everybody. And so everybody goes around and gives an opportunity to say why they want to play a game. And then what they do is they vote on it. Then it's ranked voting. So I want top three. And so I want to play this game first, second, and third. Everybody goes around and votes. And then, we see the results. So that's how we go about doing it. It actually works really, really well. And then consensus mapping, what that is you're using the group agreement on a solution to a problem, not just consensus, right? So in a nominal grouping, there is a competitive struggle, right? Because I want my alternative or my game versus what you want, right? In consensus mapping, what you're looking to do is incorporate as many different things as you possibly can from different people, right? So where is our common ground? Where's the consensus that we have? And how can we build something around that? So it's more cooperative than competitive. And then the Delphi technique is using questionnaires to refine. So the first round is send a questionnaire to everybody. You analyze the first round, and then you give a second round, right? And so what you do is through the questions on the questionnaire, what you're doing is you're refining it so that you can actually get more input from each person at a deeper and deeper level, and that way you can make the best decision possible. Best alternatives and all that. All right, and then the decision tree is really easy. What it is kind of like a yes no. So you get to a branch and you have a choice. Do I turn left or do I turn right? If you turn left, then you have another decision tree that you're going to have, right? Now, same thing in business. So you're coming up with an idea, and you're trying to determine what's actually going to happen through through these different branches. Okay, and then after you analyze the whole thing, then you can say, okay, this is the path that we should take through this obstacle or problem. All right, so here's your illustration of that. So your problem is you can either maintain the business as is, you can expand the business, or you can sell the business. Those are your three options. What happens if you maintain the business? Well, you got to work full time and you got to do all the work, or you can hire some people and work part time. So those are your two options. And then if you would chose to do, hire some people and work part time, and you expanded that out, then you'd have another decision as well, right? Exactly. How are you going to portion out the work? So you go through all of these different things, and then you identify which one you actually think makes the most sense. So it's a really easy way to conceptualize the problem, put it on paper, so that you can make the decision the best for you. All right. So now you're to the point where you got alternatives. So what do you do with them? Okay. Well, you need to evaluate them, and you need to think of it critically. One of the biggest concerns or issues with problem solving for people is they get too invested in the outcome, right? When you're analyzing a situation, it actually requires a bit of detachment. So you need to look at it rationally from an analytical perspective. And what you need to be doing is selecting the most feasible alternative and not necessarily the best alternative, right? Because you have to, it's not just profit and loss, it's everything else, right? So you might have a really good alternative, but it's too costly. Well, it's not the best. Therefore it's not the best. It's too expensive. You got to hire somebody to do it. It's maybe a time bound issue. All of those are the reasons why you would not choose it. So what you're looking at doing is, out of all the alternatives, what's the one that is checking off the most boxes, right? And then is there any ethics that you need to really consider, right? Is anybody is the decision going to negatively impact people? And if so, how much? And if it is something that's not acceptable for your company, then that once again becomes not a feasible option. Okay. All right. So here are some quantitative ways to analyze a situation. What quantitative techniques really do is they rely on evidence-based tools, right? So the first one is break-even analysis. This is really just a calculation of the volume of sales or revenue that will result in a profit, right? So essentially, how many things do I have to sell so that I can just cover the cost of actually being in business? That's break-even. Capital budgeting, that is used for your decisions like make or buy, fix or replace, upgrade or replace, rent or lease, those kind of decisions. It takes you're looking at your average rate of return, yearly returns, and then also time value money, things of that nature. Linear programming is using to optimize allocation of resources, right? Typically for a very certain situation, low risk is how you use this. because you're literally plug and playing. Where do I put the people or the assets to make the thing the best? Okay. Queuing theory really is focused on wait times, right? If the organization has too many people working at one time, not everybody's going to be waiting on customers, and then that means money is lost. If the organization has too few employees, then once again, you don't have enough people to wait on all of the customers, and that could lead to a loss in revenue. So how are you actually filling your time is kind of what queuing theory is. And then probability theory is looking at what's the likelihood that something good or bad was going to happen, right? And then weighing that into the consideration so that, if we do this, we should expect, this amount of sales and a reasonable percentage attached to that. So we believe that, this is a strong possibility. It might be a 70% that we're going to achieve a greater than the normal return. Maybe it's a 20% chance that it's going to be a normal return, and then maybe the rest be 10% would be a less than normal return. So you can assign a probability to the option, and then look at that and say, does it make sense based on the risk factor and also the output of it? All right, what is big data? Really what it is there is so much information that is being generated by everybody today, way more so in the past. And what big data refers to is this glut of information. There's just mass quantities of it. So much so that you couldn't even comb through all the information about you that's being produced on a daily basis, just through how you're interacting with your phone, on your computer, tablet, stuff you're watching, who you're calling, who you're texting, all that stuff. It's actually being collated by somebody, and because it's valuable, right? It talks about how you interact with your stuff, your technology, other people, and for marketers, that's a treasure trove. So how do you get through that? How do you make use of all of this? It's you've got to use a computer, right? You've got to use algorithms. And what they do is they perform very advanced calculations to take this glut of information and to make it something that they can actually use. All right, how is big data used? Simple. It's used mostly in marketing because companies want to know how you're actually interacting with their product. And so what they'll do is they will, for instance, if they know when you normally get hungry, start searching for restaurants, and they geolocate. So they say, all right, you're within, say, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, of their location. They might actually send you an ad for pizza, for instance, for like Domino's. Does it make sense? So you're like, I start searching for food stuffs at 9 o'clock at night because I'm lazy and I don't want to make anything and it's too late, right? Now's the time that they could hit you with an ad and you'd be more susceptible to it, right? That's combining all the data that you've been putting out there, and turning it into a usable product for a customer, for a business, and then they sell that. The people that have collated that information, they sell that to marketers so that they can get better marketing, customized marketing in front of you, ones that you're more than likely liable to actually use. All right, the next technique is a cost-benefit analysis, and it's really easy. You just look at, what does it say? Cost and benefit. So what does this technique actually cost us? And then what does it actually benefit us? So you just run the numbers. So this alternative is going to cost us this much money, and this is the potential upside of it. The problem with this, obviously, is it doesn't take into account a lot of accidental type scenarios, because it's just looking on its face. We're going to do this project and it's going to increase sales by this much, right? So if it matches up, then it makes sense. So that's the weakness, is that it doesn't take into account any of the other any of the other things that could arise out of it. So it's one of those. It's a cost benefit analysis is a great starter tool to understand if this is even worth pursuing further and deeper, right? But there's other tools that you can look at to make those better, deeper decisions. All right, so intuition is a good thing and a bad thing. It really depends. If you don't have enough information, it's a bad, because you're just reacting a lot of it out of emotion or fear or whatever. If you do have enough information, right, or you have a reoccurring problem, right, so you've seen this plenty of times, a lot of experience, then you can rely on your intuition actually being a good source of guidance from you. However, you should not rely on intuition when it's a non-programmed decision, you don't have a lot of certainty, and there's a lot of risk, right? So when you have been when you're familiar with the product or problem and you've seen it multiple times, you've got a lot of information, you can actually use your intuition, and you don't have to go through a huge complex procedure to get to the right answer. All right, so you've made a plan. You've chosen you've gone through all the alternatives. You've said this is the direction we're going to need to go. Great. Now you actually need to put it in practice. One of the key things on the success of any kind of initiative or plan is that it has to be communicated properly to the people that are going to meet the objective. Okay. And at the same time, you need to develop your control methods. So how are you going to control? How are you going to understand if it's on time? How are you going to get those reports back to you so that you can see if there is an issue and you can correct it and fix it as quickly as possible? All right, one of the ways you can do this is you can just build in checkpoints. These are preset places where we get to this point where this much amount of money is spent or this amount of time has gone by. I need an update as far as where we're at. Okay. Escalation and commitment. This is not admitting that we made a bad decision. So one of the problems with stuff is it sounds great on paper until you actually see it in practice. There might be some nuance that you didn't anticipate. Maybe something that you thought a resource that you thought was going to be one thing ended up being more expensive or not available, right? So this idea of escalation and commitment is that you refuse. There's this tendency to refuse that you actually made a bad decision from the very beginning. Okay. And then throwing good money after bad, that follows this at the escalation and commitment. What we're in too deep. We need to just keep going, right? Even in the face of bad news, bad reports, whatever, all this other stuff, it'll just get better if we just push through. Okay. And then a loss aversion is the pain of losing outweighs the joy of winning. So all of these are things that you need to be aware of, right? Did you make a good decision? How are you going to check, right? Establish checkpoints, and then you need to, depending on the size and the scale of this project, you might be very invested in the success of it, right? Because you backed it, you pushed it, right? There might be a multi-year deal. It might be a multi-million-dollar deal. And so you have a sense of ownership for that. Don't let that cloud your judgment, though, right? Because it's worse to keep on wasting company money on something that's never going to come to fruition versus being very realist when it comes to, was this a good decision? I'm not saying pull the plug too early, but if you have those checkpoints in place and you're not afraid to make tough decisions when you're faced with it, you're going to be better off overall. All right, so here's your steps. Step one: classify and define the problem or opportunity. You want detail of this. Okay, it's not just we don't have enough sales. It's how much are you lacking, right? Classify it. To give it the context, okay, because that context will help you with step two, to set your objectives and your criteria. All right, so let's say that we were down last quarter 10% sales. So this quarter, what we need to do to break even for the year, is going to be this goal, right? So maybe we have to actually have Q2 needs to be 15% over normal. Okay, that's your objective. What's your criteria? How are you going? What are your must-haves? What are your wants? What are your needs? Okay, so you set those objectives, establish your criteria, and then you get creative, right? How are ways that we can actually achieve this, right? Go through the whole brainstorming idea, bring in people, get different perspectives, right? Create new inventive alternatives so that you can accomplish the goal that you've set out. All right, then you analyze the different alternatives and then select the most feasible. Once again, remember, not the best, the most feasible, the one that can actually get accomplished. Now that you have a course, you have objectives, you have a plan. Now what you need to do is you have to plan and implement the decision. How are we going to put the people in the right place, give them the right resources so that they can achieve this goal of increasing sales 15% this quarter? And then control the decision. Where are your checkpoints along the way? The last thing you want is a quarterly goal and no checkpoints. So then it's surprise we made it or surprise we failed. You want to know beforehand. So how are you building in checkpoints so that you know that you're pushing towards that goal? All right. One of the things with going global is that you need to be more innovative. And the reason for it is because everybody else is. Competition is great for this. People are adapting to what other people are doing, and so you need to be more agile than you were. A company needs to be more agile, more adaptable than they were 20, 30 years ago because everything has changed. And this competitive report really kind of shows you where you're at, right? As far as countries, how competitive are you? And it looks at different features such as the different institutions that they have, policies and factors that determine your ranking, right? So it literally is, how is your country compared to other countries? Is it as far as competitive? And you can use that to understand where your competition is and coming from, and what unique challenges do they have to overcome. Okay, if you understand that about the market and about your competitors and your customers, what that means is you might be able to see some sort of advantage, some sort of an opportunity there. So that's one of the main reasons why in industry they look at these different reports. It's because it's interesting to see how not only countries do but also industries do in different areas, because you can use that as your planning. You can't go to Coke and say, what is your 5-year plan, right? Because they're not going to give you that kind of information. But what you can do is you can look at industry trends and you can look at all these other reports, and then you can use that as the basis for how you're going to adjust your own business. All right, and diversity once again is very important when you're talking about the globe, because it brings more creativity. And one of the reasons for it is because people don't think the same way that you think, right? They have different backgrounds, different tastes, different preferences, and the more people the more information you pull from, the more interesting idea that you can develop. Okay, so people are different in different countries. They're managed differently in different countries. You have a lot of different cultural influences. So some countries place a lot of emphasis on logic and rationality, and some it's more on participation, right? So you have to know those different nuances so that you can act accordingly, right? Same thing with power structure. Is somebody, if you're operating in a high power context, you're going to operate differently than in a low power context, right? Less in low power, there's a lot of participation of employees. In high power, there's literal no participation because it's the bosses making all the decisions, right? Same thing with like time conscious countries. Some countries are very very aware of the clock, and some countries aren't, right? So all of this is actually not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It just it's good to understand how people make decisions based on a lot of different variety of things. And if you understand that, then you can come to better decisions holistically. Because what might be important to you and to your group might not actually be important to your global customer. All right, technology helps in reducing uncertainty and risk. Cybersecurity, uh, people question their privacy using websites like Google and Facebook, LinkedIn. Um, the thing about it is a lot of people don't even care anymore. It's because they do know that they are protected from a lot of stuff. Identity theft is real. It's growing absolutely 100%. However, it's one of those things where it's become such a problem that a lot of people ignore it because it becomes too common, right? So one of the best things you can do as far as your own security is get stuff like LifeLock, right, where it's a company that's um, actively protecting your data so that nobody's opening accounts in your name or in any way impacting your future decisions based on what they're trying to do. Okay. And then cybersecurity is becoming more and more important simply because more people are using technology. It's a source of a lot of potential um, uh, money through scams. So it's very important to have a good security. All right. Um, as far as ethics, TSR, and sustainability, um, this becoming more and more prevalent. It's becoming a bigger issue simply because we have more people, right? It's we talked earlier about the makeups of populations is changing, so it's important to embrace the diversity. Now I know that we're entering into Trump's era, and it's yet to be seen how that's going to be impactful. However, you don't need a federal law saying that you have to hire people, right? If you see the value in hiring people from different backgrounds, different groups, you can just do that, right? You can prioritize that. Nobody's going to stop you. In fact, a lot of people are going to encourage you to do it. In fact, the way it's by rolling back these policies, it really what it really does is it pushes the decision on onto the employer, right? So you as a manager, what kind of group do you want to have? Now, just because the federal government doesn't say that you have to do this or that, if that's the best for you, then hire based on those preferences. All right. And then poor and unethical decisions end up being costly both to business, society, and the environment. It's one of those things when you're making unethical decisions, you can win in the short term, you can't win in the long term. It might be years before you get finally caught out on it, but it does always come back to bite you. So it's one of those things I can't stress enough. If you have a problem, it's best to deal with it now versus kicking the can down the road and making it a larger problem. Um, and then you have things like technology and big data can also help with different sustainability problems. Um,